Parliamentary updates.
The Committee for the Convention of the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, CWGL, is celebrating 40 years of existence. Part of marking the milestone was collaborating with the Rotunda Gallery at the Red House to host an art exhibition under the theme Honoring Womanhood, Eliminating the Scourge of Violence. The opening remarks were brought by resident representative of the United Nations Development Programme, Mr. Gerardo Noto.
As you may know, the Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women is an international treaty that was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly on December 18, 1979. CWGL recognizes the root causes of discrimination, including those within culture. It recognizes that traditional gender roles and stereotypes have to be eliminated if we are to be successful in ending all forms of discrimination against women and girls.
Mr. Noto explained that CWGL monitors the worldwide implementation of the UN Convention.
The Convention and the work of the Committee have provided invaluable support in opposing the effects of discriminations against women, which include violence, poverty, and the lack of legal protections, along with the denial of inheritance, property rights, access to credit. It is not accidental that we are commemorating this anniversary during this year's 16th day of activism.
He also explained that men too have a role to play.
While the work of the women's movement must continue, the active participation of men and boys is also critical. We all have a role to play in breaking the silence, be more visible, to really screen and make our voices heard in challenging patriarchal beliefs, practices, institutions, and structures, and holding each other accountable. Women's rights, this is not a zero-sum game. Women's right does not imply less men's right. Women's right implies more human rights for everybody and a more fair and justice in societies that benefits all.
Ms. Janil Maharaj, Planning and Coordination Specialist at UN Women, also addressed the audience. Referencing the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Ms. Maharaj stated that gender-based violence continues at an alarming rate worldwide.
Over the past decades, the international community has established important normative frameworks on gender equality and non-discrimination. Chief of them is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CWGL. Though violence against women was not explicitly mentioned in this convention, in its interpretation, the CWGL Committee has made it clear that violence against women is a human rights violation and a severe form of discrimination against women that is prohibited under international law.
Ms. Maharaj said that Trinidad and Tobago ratified the convention in 1990.
One of the major recommendations arising out of the review, and this is where we come to the domestication of CWGL now, is the incorporation of the provisions of the convention into domestic law. Under the dualist doctrine of international law which we operate, for the provisions of this convention to be fully realized and enforced, we require explicit domestication within the law. And further to that, we require increased awareness of the provisions by our duty bearers, our policy makers, and along the justice continuum. However, de jure compliance with CWGL requires that national legislation incorporate the convention's substantive legal rights and obligations.
And the keynote address was brought by CWGL committee member Professor Rhoda Reddock. With CWGL celebrating 40 years, Professor Reddock said there are 10 UN conventions which are important to maintaining human dignity.
Now, the establishment of UN human rights conventions, in my opinion, represent the highest aspirations of humanity for equity, justice, inclusion, fairness, nonviolence, and equal opportunities for all to achieve their fullest potential, regardless of accidents of birth, ability, appearance, economic circumstances, geography, nationality, race or ethnicity, religion, sex or gender differences, or sex and gender identities.
She explained that human rights entails much more than the common notion people have of it.
I think it's important to know that the notion of human rights is much broader, and it relates to many aspects of our everyday life and how this affects us in so many different ways. So, for example, the CEDAW Convention recognizes the many ways, the multifaceted ways in which women's human rights are violated. In families, in households, in the workplace, in business, on the streets.
Professor Reddock said the convention is not static and moves in tandem with the changing times.
We have to continuously interpret and reinterpret it in light of new information, new understandings, changing jurisprudence in human rights law, as well as our own research and preparation of the general recommendations. So, for example, Article 14 of the Convention was originally on rural women, but we have expanded this to include all disadvantaged and stigmatized groups of women, and there are many such groups in the world.
She also touched on the work of the committee with gender-based violence specifically.
In every single country, gender-based violence against women is a critical issue. And we try to deal with it by looking at the cultural stereotypes and harmful practices that feed into it. And when we look at gender-based violence, we're looking at rape and sexual offenses, including during war and conflict, femicide, battering, female genital mutilation, bride abduction, dowry murders, sexual harassment, abuse of female prisoners, acid attacks, pornographic advertising, sex selection, to name a few.
Professor Reddock spoke afterwards about the collaboration with the Rotunda Gallery.
This year, the CEDAW Committee, which is a committee that monitors the implementation of the convention, is marking its 40th anniversary. And we thought it would be a good opportunity for the UNDP in Port-of-Spain to mark this event. And UNDP, I was very pleased to see, collaborated with the Parliament on this very important occasion.
Senator Dr. Varma Dayal Singh, who attended the launch, was in high praise of the exhibition.
This is an excellent event, and it is excellent in the sense that victims of domestic violence, sometimes they are isolated by the perpetrator, and sometimes you found that they need a method to actually express themselves. So we found that art therapy is something that in psychiatry, so I'm not just a senator, I'm a psychiatrist, so art therapy is something that we also try to encourage victims of domestic violence to come out and give. Because sometimes you find this is a way they could transform themselves from being a victim to start to get back their individuality.
Senator Dayal Singh encouraged women to find their voice and citizens to support women.
I think it's fascinating that, we have this medium, and women should know that, it's really a symbol of hope, and it's really a way that they could now move into a new dimension and leave that level of violence they had behind. So I think it's something that I commend you for doing, and it's beautiful pieces. I hope people could come and support the artists. I hope people could come and decide that, you can buy pieces, because again, there's a great tax benefit out for this too.
He emphasized that men must make a change for society to improve.
Civilization came from the womb of a woman. So anytime that you have a woman being hurt, a woman being abused, we as individuals, as males, females, we have to get together and see if we could support. So even though you have the 16 days of activism, it has to go beyond that. We have to get the message that society will change if we change our concept. if we change some of the males who have this toxic sort of masculinity concept, they have to realize now it's a different society. They have to go and seek help. So a male who has this old generational idea of I'm the boss, and I saw my mother and father, and my father abused my mother, they have to realize no, society has moved on, and there are places where we also counsel men.
The Parliament channel spoke with some of the exhibitors about their work.
Okay, so my piece is entitled Fertility. It's copper and acrylic. What happened, I enjoy using the copper medium, and if it is you look at the artwork, you realize that the copper is used mainly on one part of the painting and heavily, that is on the crown of the human, the silhouette of the pregnant woman. It's used to actually depict or influence like armor. So the woman needs to protect her head, her mind space, her thoughts. And in suited with the theme, I mean, we have to protect our thoughts due to, society. Because the woman has a lot, and womanhood has a lot of influence and a lot of, we are the main reason for procreation and humanity. So basically it's in woman's hands. So that is the main part of, heavily working on that part of the piece. And as you look down, you will see like there's broken lines that, for you yourself to connect the lines and connect the dots in the piece.
The name of the piece is Legacy. I came across a photo, would have been about 2 years ago, that really spoke to me. It was a father and son at the zoo. I like the concept behind it, as you usually see women with their children and whatnot, so I decided to give it a go. It was over a process about 3 months, but within that space of time I would have taken breaks, I would have paint other stuff whilst I was going through it. So it wasn't the full 3 months, but that would have been the time frame. Well, we usually have themes that honor women. Well, to me, I find that we usually have themes that deals with women as it speaks about the art society. I don't really see it have much that honors men. So I guess it's the norm by now.
Okay, well, name of my piece is She Walks in the Shadows, and she's like a spiritual representation of the woman that we've lost to violence. And this embodiment is like a kind, gentle spirit that roams the earth, and she kind of tickles your intuition that if you're in a situation where something isn't quite right, she's like, hey, something is wrong here, She kind of hovers and lets you know that things are not good in this situation, and in that way you can try and get yourself out of it. I think it's something that is wonderful, and we go through a lot being female, and I just pray for a day where we are just level across the board, equality for all, not just thinking in terms of men and women, but human beings in general, because all of us, we're good spirits, we're beautiful people, and we don't deserve to be treated unkindly just because, we happen to be female. It's not fair. We're good people.
The inspiration came from the stories that I've heard, and a couple of people who I know, women who I know who have risen above their troubles and their tribulations and so on. And the piece is called Woman Rising, right? At one point in the piece, there's also someone lying on the ground, and she's the one who's got trampled on. And then at one side, there's the children and a baby. And that was the inspiration. It's just about all the things that women have to go through. Or some women. I think it's all women. My work is fabric, right? I work only with fabric. Well, I shouldn't say only with fabric, right? Yarns and beads, and I use different kinds of fabric methods, like quilting and so on. So it just depends on the method that I'm doing. And sometimes I may do it for half an hour, and then leave it. And sometimes I leave it for 2 days.
All artwork from each exhibition can be viewed on the Rotunda Gallery's Facebook page at the conclusion of each in-house exhibition. Stay tuned for more parliamentary updates. For more information, visit our website at www.ttparliament.org and follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram.
Parliamentary Updates.